Hello YouTube, this is going to be my review of my Whyte E-160 e-bike. Well, first of all, I'll say what model I got. I have the Whyte E-160 2023 model, so it's the version 3. There's 4 versions for the E-160. They've now since discontinued it and replaced it with the Kado, but this is the Whyte E-160 version 3 2023 model, and I got it in the RS spec. Basically means I get slightly better suspension and my brakes are a bit better. Since then I've done pretty much 3,000 miles on it, and I've changed a few things. You can see I've changed the air shock to a coil, which was definitely a good upgrade. I'll get into that later in the video. I want to start off the video by mentioning the main upgrades which I made to this bike. As you saw in the few clips which I've already shown, the coil shock was one of them. This was a massive upgrade, and I only actually did this recently in maybe the past 300 or so miles. I changed the original shock, which was a Fox Float DPS, to the RockShox Vivid Coil Ultimate. I did this because the Fox Float DPS lacked in being able to ride more sort of chunky terrain. It was okay in sort of flat impacts, and it was also perfectly fine in, for example, pedal efficiency, and there was nothing, I never had any actual issues with it. I never had it break or anything like that. But when I upgraded to the RockShox Vivid, there was an immediate improvement in the performance on just very rough terrain, such as really rutty terrain and just large rock gardens and stuff like that. Another upgrade which I found to be pretty major was installing Tyre Inserts. I went and got Tyre Inserts because when I was riding the bike normally, it felt like the tyres, no matter how high I put the pressure, if I put the pressure too high, then I'd feel like the bike was just rock hard and there was no give, and it just wasn't nice to ride. But then when I put it into lower pressures, I felt the tyres were just squirming in all the corners, and I also was often hitting the rim when riding technical terrain. So I ended up getting Tyre Inserts, and I ended up getting the Rim Packed V2 Pro Tyre Inserts, and these made a massive difference. I put originally just a Tyre insert on the rear tire, and I actually liked it so much that I put it in the front. I didn't need it in the front for a puncture protection or for hitting the rim. I never had any issues on the front, but when you have a rim packed or a Tyre insert in the rear tire, it just, when it's softer, it just sort of doesn't fold as much in corners, and it feels weird if you don't have it in the front as well. So I ended up getting one of these in the front and rear, and this was very worth it for the bike. Okay, now moving on to the front fork. With this fork I've had pretty much no issues at all. It rides really well. It's the Fox Float Performance, which is the sort of lowest model, so it's only got a low speed rebound and compression dial, but I feel like this is enough for me. And this fork pairs really well with the new coil shock I've added. The only issue I've had with the fork is I did have to replace the seals because they started leaking oil quite a lot. So I ended up replacing them with some aftermarket SKF seals, and I found these to work just as well so far. I've not ran them long enough to do a durability test on them, but so far so good. Now moving on to the wheels. I found the wheels to also be really solid. The only thing I've had to do with them is I did have to true the rear wheel because the spokes became really quite loose. But other than that, all parts of the wheel, such as the free hub and just the front wheel spokes, everything is fine. I think the inserts, the rim pack Tyre inserts, as I said previously in the video, actually helped a lot with keeping these rims in a good condition. For tyres, I have a long story though. I ran the original Max's Assegai tyre on the front until it wore out. That was fine, but the rear tyre, I did unfortunately damage this one and have to replace it before it was worn out. This was because I rode the wheel over a hill pointing upwards. It was really unfortunate, but to be honest, I don't think any tyre could have survived this. After this happened though, I was in the search for a new tyre, and I ended up putting on a Magic Mary tyre because I had good experience with them previously. I ended up buying the trail casing because I thought that the casings, I didn't really believe that they actually made all that much difference. I thought the casing was sort of a marketing thing, so I ended up buying, as I said, I bought a trail casing, which as it turns out was far too light for an enduro e-bike because I ended up ripping this tyre on the first ride. After this happened though, I ended up buying the same Magic Mary, and then instead of in trail casing, I bought it in downhill casing, and this one now lasted the full duration of its life. I ended up replacing this one until it was completely worn. It was pretty much bald, and I ended up replacing this with a Maxxis DHR2, and the reason for this was because when I installed this Magic Mary, the downhill casing one with a rim pack Tyre insert, it was nearly impossible to install. I'm not sure why. I think it's because Strawberry tyres, they just make them extremely tight, but it was just such a fight to get on it. Okay, now moving on to the brakes. So this bike came with the SRAM Code R brakes, and I'm still running these as I feel that they have plenty power and modulation for me. These brakes have also been super reliable. I haven't had to do anything with them apart from replacing the brake pads a few times. The only thing that I don't like about these brakes so much though are the rotors that came with it. It came with these SRAM centerline rotors, and I found that they often seem to be warping as they then end up rubbing on the brakes. But I've had a look online and it seems to be a common issue, and it seems that people seem to buy the higher end SRAM HS2 rotors, and these seem to fix the problem. Other than that though, these brakes have been flawless for me. Now, one of the final mechanical parts on the bike I want to discuss is the dropper. This bike came with the Crank Brothers Highline 3 dropper post, and it worked fine when I had it. I did feel it was a bit short for the size of the bike, considering I had a size large and the dropper post was only 150mm. But eventually over time this dropper post wore out to the point that I couldn't even service it as the stanchion had completely worn off. I'll insert a picture of this in the video. And then I eventually replaced it with the 1UP V2 dropper in the size of 180mm, so it actually went up in size. This dropper so far seems to work fine. It actually extends much quicker than the Crank Brothers dropper post, and so far it's been very good. Now finally I want to discuss the electronic components of the e-bike. So this bike comes with the Bosch system, this Bosch Smart System, with a Bosch Performance Line CX Gen 4 motor, which at the time of this recording is now actually outdated, and it has been replaced, this motor, with the Bosch CX Gen 5. This bike also came with a 750 watt-hour battery, as well as a Bosch LED screen which goes on your handlebars. I ended up replacing this LED remote with the Bosch Purion 200 remote, which is in the same form factor as the as the LED remote, but yet it gives you a screen which actually has statistics and shows you stuff such as distance and elevation and stuff like this. Unfortunately, I did encounter an issue with this screen where I did have to actually get it replaced, as the mount that goes around the handlebars actually broke. I did a bit of searching, and this seems to actually be a common issue with these Bosch Purion 200 controllers, and I did actually end up getting this control warranted and replaced by Bosch, which wasn't exactly quick. It was multiple months actually, so that wasn't great. Then there's my Bosch battery, the 750 watt-hour one, and this battery, I have had no problems with it at all. It has worked flawlessly the whole time I've owned it. The only issue I have had with it, which actually hasn't impacted the performance so much, is that due to the e-bike design, the Whyte E-160 design, water can quite easily get under the cover on the bottom of the e-bike. And over time, because the water has nowhere to escape, the water ends up condensing and reaching the top of the bike frame, and then ending up corroding the e-bike battery contacts as well as the contacts inside of the frame. Okay, now moving on to the motor. I am now on my second motor. I had the first one break and I got the new motor covered by warranty. Now regarding the actual motor itself, when it works, it's actually really great. The sort of power delivery I find is really intuitive. As they say, it feels like an extension of yourself. But there is definitely an issue in terms of reliability of these motors. People claim, or companies at least claim, that they last forever for thousands and thousands of miles, but at least in the UK weather, that's just not true. What also doesn't help with this is that Bosch's warranty is not amazing. When I had my Bosch e-bike motor break, I had to wait about 2 weeks to get a replacement. But my dad, who has the same e-bike, who also had to get his motor replaced, ended up waiting 2.5 months to get his one replaced, and he only got his one replaced a few months after mine was. My first motor lasted around approximately 2,500 miles, and then it eventually broke. Now finally, onto the last significant parts of the bike, which is the drivetrain. So there were cases where I would have actually wanted, say, a slightly higher gear as well as a slightly lower one, but overall I found that I've been able to climb extremely steep hills and also pedal downhill relatively fast with this range. I wouldn't want anything less than this. Now the derailleur, as you may know, this bike comes with the SRAM GX Axis derailleur, and actually it's been extremely reliable. I've only ever had one problem with it, but I once actually, shortly after getting the bike, I accidentally forgot to charge the battery for a long amount of time, and I ended up having it die mid-shift, and because of this it was sort of between gears, and it wasn't great. It was sort of a scratching between the two teeth, but once I charged the battery and put it back into the bike, this issue fixed. On the same topic of battery life though, the battery life on this derailleur is actually really quite long. You can go quite a few rides without having to charge it. Also, the actual shifting of the derailleur is flawless. I think that's the main advantage of an electronic derailleur, of course. It shifts the same every time. The shifting is just really crisp. Now, one thing to note with drivetrains, especially on e-bikes, is that they don't last very long. It's just like the same thing as the rear tire. Because of the excessive power that gets put to the drivetrain, I'm now on my third set of components of drivetrain. I'm now on my third cassette and my third chain as well. Now the final thing I want to mention about this bike is regarding the frame bearings. This was one thing I had to actually replace recently, and it's quite a difficult job. I ended up replacing the bearings with aftermarket kinetic bearings, and the tools that I used to actually remove the bearings and install them were from Bearing Pro tools. Overall, this process is definitely not the easiest to do, but it's sometimes something that needs replaced, especially when you feel that your rear wheel starts shaking from side to side. This is a common thing which causes it. I replaced all the frame bearings on the frame, but I actually think that only the bottom two were actually necessary to replace, as they had quite a lot of corrosion. Okay, now that I've talked about everything that I wanted to talk about the bike, I would now like to say a final note. Overall, this bike is amazing. The bike allows me to ride places which I otherwise wouldn't be able to ride due to the motor. The bike also allows me to do crazy features and jumps which I also otherwise wouldn't be able to do without the great geometry of this bike. is now the end of the video. Thank you for watching.